Hi, everyone. This is Cat Climaco, owner of Peaceful Presence Divorce Coaching. Welcome to the fifth event in this amazing Lunch and Learn series, where we hear from expert speakers about how to navigate the journey of divorce and co-parenting, with everything from healing tools to today's focus, which is nourishing your body to stay resilient. I just want to let everybody know that this session is recorded for people who couldn't make it live. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat as we go, and I will tee those up for Lauren at the end. So with that, let's go ahead and kick it off. I want to introduce our wonderful guest speaker today, Lauren Friarson. She is a business coach and female success coach focusing on entrepreneurs. She has over 20 years of experience in health and wellness. She's an author and works in personal development. I have experience with Lauren as well. She is my personal business coach, and I just adore the insights and structure and all the amazing coaching I get from Lauren. So I'm a little bit biased because, I think she's fantastic. But welcome, Lauren. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks. I'm excited to be here and excited to, connect with those that are not able to join us live. I will also say, before I turned business coach, I had a private practice for over a decade as a functional clinical nutritionist. I still teach at the Nutrition Therapy Institute. I always say that's my side hustle, because it's just a way that I can now pour into the future class and give them some business acumen along the way. But I think that's important, because if you're thinking, why is some business coach going to be teaching us how to eat? My previous life, my first career, whatever way you want to think about that, really is in holistic health. So the short story, outside of how I got into that journey, like many of us, I've struggled with my own health issues. And what was originally kind of like, hey, how do I fix myself? Like, I don't know if the doctors know it right, or I don't seem to fit the mold, really became a profession. And 20 years later, I've been in the industry in multiple avenues. And it's just something that is so near and dear to my heart. My husband will say to me sometimes, can you ever not be a nutritionist right now? And I'm like, no, because once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. And he wishes that we could just, go indulge. And I don't look at it from a caloric standpoint, but I see our health and the way that I want us to feel and, go through life. But I also have gone through very busy seasons in my life. Excuse me, I have a little leftover of my almost 2.5-year-old's cold. So sorry if you hear a little bit of that, but I've gone through life transitions. I have not navigated divorce myself, but I have coached people in the nutrition space and the business space for people that have. And I just know kind of what it's like when life is messy, right? When the season is messy, and how do you keep things simple, and how do you continue to take care of yourself? I really believe in the adage that you can't pour from an empty cup. And sometimes even when things are so hard, so overwhelming, and it's like, how do I just get one foot in front of the other? Sometimes it's the little things, but end up being big things, like what do we put in our body that give us so much energy to sustain those kind of navigations and challenges that we endure.
That's perfect, Lauren. That is one of the things that I hear from clients all the time, is what small incremental changes can I make to help me stay resilient throughout this process? So I love, the sort of small changes approach you take in your business coaching and applying that here as well. And, I think this community is going to get so much from that. So lovely. Thank you.
Well, excellent. Do you have any initial questions for me, or do you just want to dive in?
Let's just jump in.
Okay, so let me make sure that we switch to the right slide here. So a little bit about what I said, but it's why does nutrition matter? And I think sometimes, especially Americans and especially women, I know, Kat, you primarily work with women, we have so much pressure on ourselves. And I think sometimes we think nutrition is what size clothes am I? Or nutrition is what is the fad diet that I should be following? Should I be intermittent fasting, or should I be on a keto program? And for me, nutrition, and it was the name of my LLC that I launched 22 years ago, Fuel for Life. It's what you put in, that's going to help you with this quality of life. And when we have a lot of stress, when we have busy schedules, understanding that nutrition is this foundation of the sustained energy we want to have. Nutrition has a lot on how we can kind of combat different levels of fatigue. And it also has a lot to do with sleep. And sometimes people don't know that. And I always bring this up because when you're going through really stressful seasons or navigating life changes, sometimes we end up in this like go, 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 adrenaline, 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 cortisol, 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 more caffeine, skipping meals, more caffeine. And then when all you want to do is go to bed and recharge, you're like, why can I not sleep? Why can I not fall asleep? Why can I not stay asleep? And it's really like reverse engineering the entire day to be able to say, what did I do that not only is going to help me feel good throughout the day, but also help me get restful sleep, which is so important, especially through life challenges. And I really love to always think about nutrition as this, it's not another thing you have to get right. I mean, I would say that to anybody, that there's so much pressure. There's so many deadlines. There's so many things that we compare ourselves to. For me, nutrition has never been about perfection. I'm not myself, and I don't encourage that for people, especially when life is hard. But instead of it feeling like, oh my gosh, here's another thing I have to master, here's another thing I have to do, to kind of eliminate that and just say, what can I do to help me feel better? What can I do to just show up in a powerful way, you know, when I'm thinking really clearly? And the biggest thing, and then Kat, I'm gonna let you ask me some questions about this, but
I have love.
It's consistency over perfection. You know, it's like, I know so many people that are like a Monday starter. You know, I'm going to start on Monday, or I'm going to start after Easter. I'm going to start after, and there's this like weird date of this beginning, but it doesn't last. It's like New Year's resolutions, and there's so much pressure, and we're perfect for like a week, and then we binge, and then it's like I'm restarting. And I try so hard to say, take that out of the whole picture, and just to say, you know, if you can picture your body like a bank account, are there more withdrawals or more deposits going in? Day in and day out, what is the good things that we're doing to take care of ourselves? And the bad, if you drop your cell phone, you don't smash the shit out of it, right? Excuse me for that. But like, you know, you pick it up and you keep going. And so if you have an extra serving of ice cream, or you skipped a protein shake or whatever that is, okay, who cares? You just keep going and focusing on that consistency. So that's kind of the starting point that I wanted to begin this afternoon.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I have a few questions. So I'm just going to go one by one. You know, people are, like you said, fad diets. You know, we're going to do lots of protein. We're not going to do any carbs. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And you might be getting into this a little bit later, but I guess my big question right off the bat, when we're in, like a lot of this community is in times of high stress, what are like the top 3 foods, or, you know, like what should my plate look like, right? Or, you know, if I'm not functioning, if I haven't had a lot of sleep, you know, if I'm going straight to coffee, you know, that's not really going to help. What do I need to put in my body if I can just grab one thing quickly to put in my body right at the start of the day? What would that be?
That's a great question. And we are going to get into this a little bit more, but I will tell you the answer you want to hear, but I'm also going to reframe it of what I want people to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Staying with this conversation that perfection is not the goal, right? And really leaning into the empathy that when you're going through a life transition, you're taking care of kids, maybe there's an abuser in the picture, you know, you're navigating divorce. Like there's so many layers of this. This is not the season of like, hey, I want to get back to my pre-mom body and have abs for spring break. I mean, it's a totally different approach. And so staying within that season that we're speaking to specifically, more than even what you need to put in, is sometimes what not to do. And so I'm going to tell you the 3 that I would do, but right alongside of that is I would never start your day with a high sugary processed meal. You are setting yourself up for failure for everything else. The cravings you're going to have, the crashes you're going to have, and the sleep that you are not going to have. So grabbing a donut, grabbing a muffin, grabbing some pastry that's at the coffee shop that you're at, that would be my first, like, don't do this one. The second is not eating at all. Sometimes I think when we're very busy and when we're emotional, our appetite goes away. I'm like actually the in that camp of people. You know, sometimes I think when we're emotionally eating, people think of overeating, you know, and like binge eating, like, oh, I'm so sad and I ate 18, you know, pints of Ben and Jerry's. I actually fall into the camp that when I get so busy or I'm very stressed and things are on my mind, I forget to eat. And so there's going to be like little reminders of like, hey, even if it's small, put something in your body. So that first is you avoiding the really processed sugary meal. The second is not doing it at all. And the third is only living on caffeine. You know, sometimes I think people are like, oh, I have my bulletproof coffee, or now Starbucks has their protein Cold Whip or whatever's happening, that it can't just be more things that are driving cortisol and driving adrenaline in conjunction with not eating. So those would be my flags of like, try not to do these.
Yeah.
And then with it, in any fashion, whatever this looks like, if you can start your day with protein.
Yeah.
All protein breaks down to amino acids, which is your neurotransmitters, which is your feel-good hormones, and also your sleep hormones. So if it's a ready-to-drink protein drink, from Costco, like there are some brands that are more superior, but if it's grab and go because that's what works, then that's what works. Having a protein bar, having a hard-boiled egg, if it's unrealistic that you're going to make an omelet with mushrooms and kale and raw grass-fed cheese and all of the things, I get it, right? But if you can
Lauren, this morning, I had court yesterday with my abuser, and this morning, all I felt like I could manage was a handful of nuts. Yep. And so I just ate a handful of nuts because I was like, this is all I have the bandwidth for. Made breakfast for my kiddo, threw a handful of nuts in my mouth, drank a bunch of water to flush all that cortisol and all those adrenaline hormones. But I do forget to eat as well, especially in times of high stress. Some of those fight or flight stress signals literally turn off when we're in our sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. It turns off our digestive system, right? Because it's telling our nervous system, which our nervous system doesn't know the difference between you need to run from a bear or you have court with your abuser. Right. It can't distinguish. And so it literally turns off our hunger signals, but we can't focus. We can't do what we need to do. We can't behave strategically. We can't co-parent strategically with these disordered people if we don't have protein. So I love that, right? Like hard-boiled egg, have that on hand, handful of nuts if that's all you can manage. I love that. And, sugar cravings do go up when you're stressed, which I think you know more about than I do, but it's so easy to want to do that, and sometimes it just feels
sugar
good.
Is the fastest absorbing carbohydrate.
Okay.
And it helps make serotonin. So that's where like that feel good comes in. There's the sugar high. The consequence of that is it's short-lived and the crash is not worth the temporary joy, but that's where that comes from. That's the way that the body's going to kind of boost the mood. But so with your must-haves in the morning, definitely protein, absolutely some hydration. When you're really stressed and you're going, and you're often caffeinated or skipping meals, really important. So even just like a glass of water alongside of what you're doing. And the third with that, Kat, is I always want to encourage people to just have a few of their go-to staples on hand. And so there's a famous saying, fail to plan and plan to fail. So if there's nothing there, I mean, you're setting yourself up for a way to be unsuccessful. But if we had things like a dozen hard-boiled eggs in the fridge, if you had some ready-to-drink protein, if you had some overnight oats that have protein in them, if you had some Greek yogurt, just something that just like you could only muster up a handful of nuts, if you could have a couple bites of Greek yogurt and maybe throw some fresh fruit in it, just saying, okay, I'm not meal prepping for the week, I'm not grocery shopping for the month, but when I'm not hungry, when I'm super busy, what are my 2 to 3 things that I can just go to? That's really going to help you be successful.
Yes, I love that. And okay, you mentioned hydration. Like how much water should we be drinking?
Is your audience mostly in Colorado?
I mean, like I think
Colorado's always higher because we're at altitude. Fun fact, we have like the highest rate of kidney stones in the country because we're chronically dehydrated. But at the very, 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 very minimum, half of your body weight in ounces. And that's, most people would still say is dehydrated. So if you weigh 150 pounds, 75 ounces at the minimum, that whole like 8-ounce glasses, 8-ounce glasses, that's pretty dated compared to where we're at these days. If there's any alcohol, if there's any caffeine, you want to have more if you exercise, if you're in a humid climate. I think pretty safely for people is about a gallon of water. I am not one of those people that likes to like walk around with a big jug. I think it's awkward and it has motivational signs on it. But, if you have a traditional tumbler, the Yeti size or the Stanleys, that are so popular, to say, I'm going to drink this 3 or 4 times a day, and just thinking about filling it up a few times throughout the day. So I'll, fill it up from morning to lunch, lunch to afternoon, afternoon to evening. You're going to get yourself to where you need to be.
Yeah. And are you adding like hydration stuff to it, like liquid IV or any of those hydration salts, or are you just going pure water?
A little bit of both. I do believe in electrolytes. I think that especially when you're stressed, your whole sodium potassium system is overcharged if you're exercising, if you're at altitude, and it can just help with overall relaxation. So one of the minerals that's added to a lot of those is magnesium, which is actually, you'll see here in my recommended supplements, that can help with muscle cramps, it can help with muscle tension, it can help with headaches, it can help with sleep. So I am a fan of adding electrolytes to the water.
Amazing. Amazing. I have more questions, but I have a feeling you're going to get to some of that. So,
okay. So here's one of my favorite diagrams. And I mean, Kat, to tell you conservatively, I've driven this out 10,000 times, is like, literally that's how important this conversation is. But when you can wrap your head around that stabilizing blood sugar is going to stabilize your energy, it changes everything in regards to nutrition. And it takes away, in my opinion, good foods and bad foods, like high calorie and low calorie, and some of this like really, Jurassic training that we have around nutrition, and understanding if you put diesel in an unleaded car, it's not going to run. And so when you put a bunch of crap in your body, it's not going to run well. And when our blood sugar is all over the place, it affects our mood, it affects our focus, it affects our stress, and it becomes habitual. You get in this cycle. And so when you can kind of put your body in cruise control, you have this more sustained energy, less highs and lows. It doesn't mean they're obviously not happening, but it also contributes to the sleep. So the red, which is like, you're overeating sugar and then you're over-secreting insulin and then you're dropping and you crave more sugar and all over. If you can picture a car slamming on the gas, slamming on the brakes, slamming on the gas, slamming on the brakes, I mean, nobody wants to be a passenger in that car. The green, you're in cruise control, right? We're efficient, we're smooth and steady. We can do this for a long period of time. This is something that people can, I think, overstudy and overcomplicate, but the principles, the concepts are simple. The first is don't skip meals and don't skip snacks. Even if it's small, like you said, a handful of nuts, a piece of jerky, like a drink of a protein drink, as long as there's something kind of constantly coming in that we never hit empty, that's important. The second is that no matter what, when you have a carbohydrate, you always have a fat or a protein with it. So one of the ways that we oversecrete insulin and then crash, and this is notorious for almost everybody, is we just grab a piece of fruit. I'm just going to have a banana. I'm just going to have an apple. And even though the fruit is better for you than the donut, fruit is sugar. And when it isn't paired with a fat or a protein, you're still going to oversecrete the insulin and you're still going to crash. And this has a lot to do with weight management, but I'm not teaching that. I want you to just understand how this is with mood and focus and stress and sleep. So if you have the apple, have a tablespoon of peanut butter with it. If you have the banana, have a slice of turkey with it. It can be really simple, but making sure that the proteins and the fats are there. And the third, so we're like, don't skip, always have a fat or a protein with the carb. The third is back to what we talked about in the beginning, is just starting your day with protein. If you start your day with a simple carbohydrate, a piece of toast, a bagel, cereal, skim milk, you kind of set yourself up for difficulties throughout the entire day. If we start our day with protein, along with ideally a carb and a healthy fat, you've already jump-started the success you're going to have through the rest of the 8, 10, 12, 16 hours that you are doing things.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of our go-to snacks around here is apple and peanut butter. Big time. And then I was thinking about something you said earlier of like, it's not about perfection, it's about intention. You mentioned specifically, I'm not going to tell you not to eat that ice cream. And I just heard what you said about sugar and protein. Like, are you somebody who will say, I'm not going to shame you. Let's, if you need that ice cream, eat a protein with it. Or like, do you know what I'm saying? I heard put vanilla ice cream with peanut butter if you really have to do it. Or, just because there is that sort of.
I'm definitely never going to shame anybody. One of the things with ice cream, as opposed to like fat-free frozen yogurt or something, is there is fat in it. Like traditional ice creams, the fat will slow the absorption. Most people at that point, the ice cream is like the late night kind of comfort bite. It's not the addition to or in replacement of like a salad with salmon. You're like, screw it, I'm just having ice cream for lunch. That's not the more typical patterns.
Right.
I'm a big fan of the 80-20. 80% take care of yourself, 20% life is going to give us curveballs and we have to have our vices.
Yeah.
The bigger picture with that, and this is more of a mindset and just the overall relationship with food, is kind of twofold here. One is, I always say, and this is someone who struggled with their relationship with food for a very long time. For people that don't know me, I was very overweight for over a decade. I tried to out-train a bad diet in the fitness industry. So I've walked that journey. But, to say, is this getting me closer to or further away from my goal? Is this helping me or hurting me? Because understanding that there's that short-term fix. Like, I feel like crap. I'm going to eat chips and salsa and have a margarita. But what's the outcome? Do you really feel better afterwards, or do you feel even worse? And kind of then thinking, what are some other ways that I can manage the stress, that I can get my mood up? And maybe that's a walk. Maybe that's playing with your dog. Maybe that's taking a bath. Like, what are some other ways to work through that so that food isn't always the comfort? The other, and I am big on having the things that you love. I love Prosecco. I look forward to it on Friday night. We all have our things. Is if you want to be a small, have a small. If you want to be a large, have a large. And it's kind of this little saying, and I know that's more with weight management, but even in the grand scheme of things, taking size alone, but just like the ultimate journey, like if you eat a tablespoon or a quarter cup or a half a cup or a gallon, do you really notice the difference? Like that kind of, I had it tasted good. And so savoring, sometimes a smaller portion, that you get the fulfillment, that you're not shaming. No one's shaming anybody, but then the disappointment doesn't come with it.
Yeah.
Because 99% of the time when there is some type of binge or indulgence, then the individual is going through their own shame, blame game and feeling poorly about it. That I'd rather just say, just have it in moderation. Don't make it the staple, and enjoy it, and then keep going, and not put that much energy and merit to it.
I love that. Tell me about you're talking about how this affects your mood, sleep, show me what is that big red curve at the end of the day?
So the red one is the highs and the lows. The green
Right.
is the steady, where we want to be. So when you skip breakfast and you live off caffeine and your blood sugar drops, that's when someone's hangry. So you go to work and someone asks you a question and you're irritable. You are more annoyed than you should have been. Your kid asks you something and you just literally don't have the foundation to handle it. And then when you're super stressed and annoyed and your kid is yelling at you and you're late doing something for work and you want to feel better, your body's not going to say, oh, I want to have a kale salad with grilled chicken and cucumber slices on it. You're like, I need a Frappuccino and a muffin stat because I feel like crap. And you kind of go through this yo-yo all over the place. And then at night you have this racing brain. You lay down, you're overstimulated, you've got way too much cortisol pumping through your body, you've been on this blood sugar roller coaster, and the idea to like rest and recover is not even in the horizon of your nervous system. And you are like, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, oh my gosh, and I'm anxious and I've got to do this. And it leads to very disrupted sleep. Where the green, when you like have a hard-boiled egg with your coffee, that same scenario, you get to work or you get cut off driving and you don't have that immediate, like short temper, like, oh my God, like the smallest things feel like the largest events in the world. It's like, okay, I was a little bit late. I'm going to figure it out. Okay, my kid has said my name 20 times in 10 minutes. That's fine. Say it 21 times. I've got this. It just is kind of an armor to not take away life's problems, but support you that you are more equipped to handle them.
Yeah. And for a lot of my clients is they've gotten 75 texts from their ex-husband in 10 minutes. And, so just remembering to like check in with yourself first. I love that. Like eating something that's going to give your brain the food and the fuel that it needs to handle other little stressors really well. I love that idea.
Yep.
I have a question that a lot of people, some people eat with their kids, some people don't. As single parents, when you're with your kids, you have a really structured routine. When you're not with your kids, your routine is maybe not as structured. But eating at the same time every day before you go to bed, or how far, between dinner and bedtime, does that even matter for restful sleep?
Yes and no. mean, I think the more that our bodies can predict what's coming, the better they respond. So back to when I was like, consistency is better than some of these hardcore diets. The people that are like going keto every other Monday, that's harder than just eating not perfectly consistently. So if it's, oh, I'm super structured, my kid is here, and then they're gone, and then I'm balls to the wall. Like there's so many layers of that, which is going to be more challenging. For the most part, I don't believe our bodies can tell time. I mean, what happens in a 24 hours, and whether it's happening at 6 p.m. or it's happening at 2 p.m., our bodies are really, really, really good at utilizing nutrients to put things together that we need. And it's also really good at breaking down nutrients to consume so that we have the energy for the things that we need. All of that to be said, has anybody benefited from drinking a bottle of wine and eating a pint of ice cream before bed? No, right? Would you benefit if you did it at 8 a.m? No. But if it's like, I only eat carbs in the morning. I shouldn't eat carbs at night. In like a 12-hour, 24-hour clock, your body is always keeping track of those deposits and those withdrawals.
Yeah.
Some of those more key foundational items that we were talking about of not skipping, always having a protein or a fat, eating every couple hours, to me, that carries much more merit than, oh, I can only have bread on my salad at lunch, but I can't have it at night. I mean, our bodies are much more complicated and intelligent than that.
So like consistent input, consistent protein, consistent nourishment, less sugar, that's going to keep us more grounded, especially
100%.
when we're stressed. Yeah.
100%.
You mentioned that cortisol, spike that a lot of us are going through in stress times, or even like in moments of really high stress. Is there anything that you can recommend as far as, you mentioned supplements to sort of bring us down from that cortisol spike and that adrenaline spike?
We will get there. Don't you worry.
Okay.
Don't you worry. So we have talked kind of a little bit about this, but I'll just kind of go a little bit more in case there's anything, Kat, that comes up specifically for, your clientele and the people you serve in regards to the sleep. But I think that there is a lot to be said, and this really tees up from the question you just said of like, does our body tell time, of what's going to help us not only fall asleep and also stay asleep. When we're really stressed, when we are burning the candle from both ends, we're taking care of everybody else besides ourselves. Sleep is often one of the first things to go, and it's the thing we need the most outside of the worrying mind and racing mind because of the obvious that someone's going through. When we're overstimulated, we're overcaffeinated, we're undernourished, all of that impacts not only how you fall asleep, but you stay asleep. And so because so much happens when we're sleeping, where we recover, where we recharge, where our bodies repair, so important that that's happening. Some of it, not to beat a dead horse, we've already kind of chit-chatted about, which is watching how much caffeine is throughout the day, having more protein throughout the day, not skipping meals. But outside of the nutrition, just want to open up the dialogue of like, how can you maybe have a more calm evening? Or what are some things that you can do that give you a sense of having control, especially when you feel like you're totally out of control? There's so many things you're out of control with. So when I say like, I've not walked this exact walk that you have been through, but I've been through life events that same feeling of like, oh my gosh, no matter what I do, I just can't win. Or you just never know when something's going to blindside you or how to be prepared for that. One of the ways that we lower cortisol, one of the ways that we lift our dopamine, our serotonin, things that make us feel good, is to create control and certainty in our lives in the areas that we can control. And so one of them is putting routines in place. Just the brain, the body knows this is going to happen. Another one is the nutrition that we're having. But another piece of this that I think is sometimes missed in the holistic space, but it carries so much merit, is trying to calm down at night. And it might not be butterflies and unicorns that you get an hour bath with bubbles and a glass of wine and meditation music, but is there a boundary at when you stop looking at your phone? Is there some type of affirmation that you read before bed? Is it that you switch from TV to reading before bed? Is it that you focus on the 3 best things that happen throughout the day, even if the whole day had gone to crap? Like what are the things that go into place? Because this has so much to do with that blood sugar roller coaster. So your adrenals, which pump out cortisol and adrenaline, have an inverse relationship with insulin, with blood sugar. So when insulin drops, we drive cortisol, right? When cortisol is high, insulin drops. Like they have this yo-yo relationship. So if we go to bed not in a calm resting state, but we go in an anxious state, if we go in a worried state, what is called your circadian rhythm, where cortisol should be low at night, right? It rises and falls with the sun, and you are tired and you go to sleep, and then it naturally rises in the morning. That's what should have you wake up and be energized and kind of sustain throughout the day, and then it goes down. What happens if you have this racy mind and you're worrying is instead of cortisol dropping, it's high. That's where people can't fall asleep. Or if you've eaten, sugar all throughout the day, when that over secretion of insulin comes in, your body knows that you need a certain amount of blood glucose to survive. So in order for that to happen, this is a little sciencey, but I just want you to follow the story. The liver has to release stored glucose. And when that happens, that's a pathway from the adrenals. So you're back into this like startled feeling. That's where sometimes people wake up at 3 a.m, 2 a.m, and they're wide awake. They want to run a marathon. They have more energy at that window than they do all throughout the day. By getting our bodies to calm down and nourishing in a way that we get out of that highs and the lows from the adrenal pathway outside of the food pathway has a lot to do on how we can recover, and a lot to do with how we show up, and a lot to do with how we can really feel confident or capable of handling the stress and the curveballs that are coming at us.
Yeah, so I've had a challenged relationship with sleep, my whole life. And, when I went through my divorce and, it's of course with these guys always ongoing. Sleep is one of the things that is most disrupted for me and for many of my clients. And I have been reading this book called Why We Sleep. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's actually an 800-page book, but it's fascinating. It's very science-based, but what he's explaining, is exactly what you're saying. And, part of what he talks about too, my clients are always talking about, I need somebody to help me be strategic. I need, it's hard for me to function. It's hard for me to think about strategy in my case. One of the things I always ask them is like, how much sleep are you getting? Because with sleep, there's this amazing, not to get too far into that, but process of your brain takes the information from your day, processes and synthesizes it, decides what to put in long-term, decides what to get rid of, helps you remember and literally see patterns in your life. You can solve problems in the morning after you sleep that you could not solve before you go to bed.
Correct.
So with my clients, what I always tell them is like, how much sleep are you getting? Sleep on it before you send that message to your co-parent. Give your body and your brain a chance to synthesize the information of the day. And it has huge long-term effects, right? They talk about, people who aren't getting enough sleep. It has chronic health consequences, like dementia. Things like that, heart disease. It's so key to our survival. And so prioritizing sleep is really, really huge, especially if you're navigating something like this. And so, one of the other things, and maybe this is just a myth, maybe silly question, but I heard, that one of the ways that we can stop ourselves from waking up is to ensure that we maybe have like a handful of nuts or whatever it is, protein, before we go to sleep. So our body isn't hungry and waking up in the middle of the night looking for that food. Is that something?
It's not that you're hungry, but I do agree with it. And it's protein more than fat. There is some protein in it, but it's primarily a fat. Yep. What happens is the protein, there's two things. Number one, it stabilizes blood sugar. So you don't have that drop that's going to kick off for your body to release stored glucose that has you waking up ready to, tackle the world.
Yep.
But the other is that all protein, if you can picture like a strand of Legos and they break apart into individual ones, a big strand of protein goes into smaller blocks of what's called an amino acid, which are the building blocks for everything in the body. So where some of them is like, hey, this goes to collagen, which is for my muscle recovery. And hey, this goes to, bone and muscle tissue and making sure that I've got lean body mass. There are others that are very specific to creating neurotransmitters, which is the brain chemistry and communication from the brain to the body. And some of them that you notice more during the day, serotonin, your feel-good hormone, dopamine, a feel-good hormone, serotonin converts to melatonin. And so it has a lot to do with your pathway to sleep. So back to, if you don't put the right gas in the car, it's not going to work right. If we live on fumes or we're not getting the essentials that we need, it's not going to work right. And so your body is not necessarily waking up because you're hungry. It's either because the blood sugar is dropping or we don't have enough of those building blocks to create enough melatonin that keeps us asleep.
Yeah. So that consistency throughout the day is so important. That's
so
huge.
important.
Yep.
So moving on here just a teeny bit, I think that when you are super rushed or you're super overwhelmed, what are the things that I can do? What are the ways that, again, you feel control when you feel out of control, and how can you set yourself up for success? And I want to encourage anyone who's listening to this, plan for real life. You've got to plan for busy mornings, long work days, when you just are emotionally exhausted. And for some people, that means on the days you feel good, right? The days you have more energy, the days that maybe your abuser has not contacted you 5,000 times, you do a little extra meal prep and you store it away in the freezer. In the same way, someone who's pregnant and in that third trimester when they're nesting and they know that fourth trimester, they're not sleeping. And so a lot of new moms make enchiladas and they make lasagnas and they just have it in the freezer so it's ready to go. Sometimes you have things like that just ready to go. Going back to that list of what's your go-to, easy, simple, and it's on hand. If that's, veggie hummus packs, if that's your Greek yogurt, if that's the ready to drink protein drinks, that just makes it really easy. If you can plan for that, it's already going to set yourself up for then when you're behind the 8 ball, you're tired, you're hungry, you're overwhelmed and trying to make some decisions. And I have this concept that I talk about. If you could just remove the decision fatigue around food. Sometimes it's like, I don't know what to have. And then it's like, oh, I should have a salad. Oh, but I really want pasta. Oh, but that's going to take too long. And then we end up in the McDonald's drive-thru or whatever that looks like. Any level of planning and preparation, not to be perfect, but just to say, these are my staples. If I'm super hungry, I can go grab a turkey stick. If I'm super hungry, I've got some nuts and an apple in the pantry. And really lean into the value of repeat meals and easy snacks. So this is a little bit of the business coaching in me, but some of the most successful people have mastered the mundane of habits by allowing their brains to have the bandwidth to do the hard things. And so they eliminate things like, what are they going to wear every day? Like if you study Tony Robbins, I think he wears jeans and a white shirt every day, right? He doesn't have to ever think about what am I going to wear because it's the exact same. So he has this genius superpower for everything else he's doing. Well, for moms, for people who are going through life transitions, for when it's so hard to even how am I going to put on my pants today? How am I going to get my kid to school? And that level of exhaustion, it's one less thing you have to think about. And if finances are not in question, and to work with, those ready fit meals or, where they have the salmon and the brown rice and the broccoli and you buy 6 of them for the week and you eat the same thing every day. That's one of my favorite go-to strategies. If you say, hey, we are going to eat the same egg bites and a banana every day for breakfast, but you just don't have to think about it. There's just something really empowering and something that's really advantageous to leaning into those repeat meals and those repeat snacks.
That's so huge too. And that's such a point of connection for, families, food, meals you love to enjoy, putting things on repeat, I think a lot of people feel like they don't want to get in a food rut, but I think of it differently. My son knows it's always Taco Tuesday. On Tuesdays, we're always going to have tacos, and he looks forward to that. And one of the things that I tell moms who are sending their children over to the other parent's house is object permanence. The idea that your kids know that when they come back to your house after dad's weekend on Monday, you're always going to have this one meal. Mm-hmm. It's something that you think about and look forward to. And this is something that you can plan with your kids. What is your favorite dinner that I make? I will always make that on Monday when you come back from your dad's house. Having that set up, I know on Mondays, we're always going to have this. So I'm always going to have these ingredients on hand. I'm always going to make this meal. That speaks exactly what to you're talking about, not having to make a million decisions, knowing what I need to have on hand, and that's just such a great point of connection for protective parents and their kids too. Always Taco Tuesday. Mondays, we always do burgers or whatever it is. Mondays, we always do salmon. Mondays, we always do, whatever it is. So that right there is, two birds with one stone, connection with your kids and planning ahead and having those on hand. I love that idea.
Yeah, I agree with that. I teach at the school, I shared that, and they often have to do case studies. And then as part of that is like to give a meal plan. And one of the number one like feedbacks or, criticisms that I always give them is I'm like, who are you creating this meal plan for? Because nobody has that much time or the budget to be able to have like 18 different unique fruits and veggies on hand that everyone is different. Like, excuse me. And with that, just different ways to kind of make it joyful and it not feel like a task or another to-do list. Sometimes I just encourage people to kind of eat within the seasons. Like, I think that, whether you're a faith-based person or the universe, or if this aligns with you, is that, so much was created for us for different seasons. And there's a reason in the winter, when our vitamin D is lower and it's colder out, that we have more comfort foods and we choose squashes and potatoes and things that kind of warm us up, where in the summer where we're getting more sunshine and we tend to be out and about, that we need more sugar and we need more fresh fruit. And so if you're like, oh my gosh, Lauren, I have had my overnight oats and the blueberries because you told me to keep it simple for the last 3 months and I can never eating overnights and blueberries again, even just lean into it where you don't have to have 5 different breakfasts, but just pick the same breakfast for that week or a couple weeks and then change it up and then ask it, your body kind of what it needs and what's available, and looking at what fruits are in season, what veggies are in season, and what makes it easy. And I will tell you, after someone who has been helping people with meal plans for 2 decades, AI is going to get a lot of people out of business. No, I'm just kidding. But there is a lot of really great tools and resources in there. And sometimes to just be able to say, I have less than 5 minutes to make dinner, here's my 3 2 staples, give me some meal ideas. It's like mind blowing what is created and what's I think things that we wouldn't necessarily think about. And so I just want to encourage people to use that tool. It's like, don't do all the legwork yourself. You don't have to anymore, but say we love bison, we love chicken, we love broccoli, I love rice. Give me 3 meals that are budget friendly and I can cook in less than 5 minutes. And, it will just kind of take some of that heavy lifting of planning out of the picture.
Lauren, that's such a great tip. I use AI for different things, but decision fatigue, right? When we're managing so much, life in general is just busy, but what a lot of my clients in this community are going through is the most stressful thing anyone will ever experience. So the idea of thinking about, I remember my friend during the pandemic said, dinner comes around every day. Like, it's like, yes. And this is a great suggestion for how to simplify it. And just one less thing you have to think about. I love that. That's huge.
Awesome. Okay. So back to your supplement question. I am someone who is an advocate of supplements. I am not someone who is like, hey, if you eat your supplements, then you can eat whatever else you want. That's not it. But I do believe that our food is depleted. I believe we are all more stressed. I believe our environment is polluted. Like, I think that there are some variables that we say, hey, how can I give my body a little extra armor to handle all of life, let alone when you're going through major stressors? I also think that people overdo it with supplements and they jump on the bandwagon of Dr. Oz recommended this and Oprah recommended this. And I saw this on the end cap of Vitamin Cottage and this was in Women's Health and my OB recommended this, that people end up with like a pantry full of 50 pills, but then they don't do anything. I'm an advocate of like, what are the key players for that individual? I like to encourage people to stick to like 3 to 5 supplements sometimes, especially if they're new or to a nutrition journey or just have a lot going on. But the first one here is magnesium. So magnesium is probably one of the most valuable minerals in the entire body, and it's deficient in almost everybody unless you supplement with it. There are many different types of magnesium. Some are more specific to bone health. Some are more specific to digestive health. But getting a magnesium that is good for mental health, that is good for sleep, that is good for calming the nervous system, and to take it before bed, it will help with the sleep, but it helps with just that overall, like, when you're just wound up all the time. The second one that I would highly, highly encourage is something called adaptogenic herbs. And If you're not familiar with them, these plants grow in climates where there is, excuse me, major changes between like drought and flood or any type of climate change. In the way that they have to adapt to survive, the theory is they help us adapt to survive. So many people don't know this family, but they're familiar with things like ginseng or rhodiola or ashwagandha. Those are all different adaptogens, but that helps with the blood sugar roller coaster, and it helps with that fight or flight mode. So excuse me, I'm so sorry. You cannot eliminate the stress in your life, but the adaptogens kind of help you put on rose-colored glasses. It just kind of helps you not feel like so on edge and a little bit more capable. We talked about electrolytes. So unless you have any specific questions, I'm not going to repeat what we already, excuse me, you might have to talk here for a second, Kat.
No,
we already talked about. But the other
I
is just the protein. So please, you say something, I'm going to mute and cough.
You do it. We were talking earlier, I think you mentioned like having the glass of wine at night before you go to bed. I think that's what a lot of people who are experiencing a trauma tend to do. They think this glass of wine is going to help relax me before bed, but really all the sugar in it and the alcohol, it's just a disaster for your nervous system. I think I was in that pattern for a while too. Something that I have started doing, you were talking about a bedtime routine, what's going to help us, calm down. One of the ways I get my magnesium is there's these like mocktails, and they literally have magnesium in them. They sell them in cans. They're very reasonably priced. I have one of those before bed so often. I put it in a really pretty cocktail glass. I put ice in there. I get in bed and I read with my mocktail with magnesium, and it's just part of my routine that helps me down regulate my nervous system before bed. That really helps me get a good night's sleep. And, so for people who are wondering, how can I start this? I'm not a big pill taker. There's ways to get magnesium besides just, the pills. Now, you're talking about which specific magnesium you should take, but, it's just a really quick, easy way to incorporate a lot of the things you were saying. Down regulate before bed, have that little, mocktail. Don't drink alcohol, replace maybe alcohol with a mocktail. It's sort of like hitting all those points at once. And then there's so many of those mocktails also that have those adaptogens in them. Like L-theanine is one of them, I think. Is that correct?
Say it again. Theanine?
Yeah. You know how to say it. I don't.
No, there's a lot of those and things that help with sleep. And again, that are calming and relaxing. There's herbs like passion flower, valerian root that are really good for that. But now again, we're into the like, which one do I take? Do I do L-theanine? Do I take passion flower? And if you find a cocktail and that's, your go-to, that's great. But the magnesium, it will normally be labeled if you're at like a health food store. So maybe don't go to Amazon, but like which ones, like magnesium citrate is really good for bone health. Magnesium malate, magnesium glycinate, those are more of the relaxing, calming ones. They actually have a drink called Calm. It's like a powder and just add it to water. It's kind of like a tea. And the adaptogens are not necessarily at night. So the adaptogens help us adapt to whatever else is happening. So if you're exhausted in the morning and you need something to pick you up, or you are wound tight at night and you need something to calm down, they adapt to what is happening no matter what. The electrolytes we talked about. And the other one here I was just going to say is just back to the protein, having those kind of go-tos. There is a company I've been with for over 13 years, and I can't even imagine my life without them, especially when I'm busy, because it's just something I have to think about and it's easy. But whatever that is for you, if you look at your grocery list, if you look what's in the pantry, and just have 5 or 10 go-to sources of protein powder is an easy one. You can throw it in overnight oats. You can throw it in a smoothie. You can throw it in Greek yogurt. But outside of that, is it jerky? Is it deli meat? Is it hard-boiled eggs? Is it, rotisserie chicken that you're pulling some of it off and just eating it by itself? Like, it doesn't have to be hard, but that protein is the foundation for your mood, for your amino acid, neurotransmitter production, and for your sleep.
Yeah. And, cortisol creates inflammation in our bodies. And a big part of stress responses is inflammation in the body. Are these a good way to manage that inflammation and reduce inflammation in our body? Do you have any tips about that as well? Because that's something that we hear a lot about.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard to describe in a simple way. It's not necessarily the cortisol that is leading to the inflammation. There's a lot of ways to reduce inflammation, but the inflammation, it's a protection, right? It's the ways your body's saying, hey, like I'm under attack, or I'm going through something and I need to support what's happening. One of the first is what we talked about in the very beginning of avoiding high sugar, high processed foods. That is so inflammatory in the body. That will be a game changer. Number two is the hydration in any type of movement. It doesn't mean, oh my gosh, I have to go to the gym 45 minutes or I shouldn't do anything. That could be a 5-minute walk on your lunch break. That could be an extra walk around the block with your dog. Just any type of movement that would be there. And sweating. Sweating is one of the best ways to get that inflammation out. So if that's a sauna, if that's a hot shower, if that's exercise, would be something that could get there. And then just as possible, and I don't want to stress you out or add more pressure, just eating more cleanly. Things that I think sometimes we have a conversation around, but we don't always understand the mechanism, like organic versus non-organic foods. Sometimes, people talk about how organic foods, because the plant didn't have a pesticide to protect it and it had to protect itself, it has a higher nutrient value. It has higher, vitamins and minerals than a non-organic food. But the other conversation of that is things like glyphosate or different pesticides are really inflammatory and they're really hard on our gut. And then you have these stomach issues. And then when you have stomach issues, what do you want to eat? You don't want to eat a steak. You want to eat a piece of bread. You want to have pasta, and that you get into this cycle. And so this is where nutrition from a holistic or functional standpoint, I think, is more challenging than a caloric standpoint of like, hey, only eat this many calories, or, oh, don't eat this much sugar. But one step at a time, if you're saying, I need to reduce the inflammation in my body because I care about my long-term health, starting to pay attention to things like cage-free, eggs versus like chicken coop eggs, gluten or organic versus non-organic, non-GMOs, wild-caught meats, and eating the rainbow. This one is when you're busy and you're on the go and you can't think, beyond the next hour, let alone the next week, can sometimes be challenging. But as people come out of the fog and they're getting control over their life again and putting that structure in, one of the number one ways to combat that inflammation is to eat the rainbow. They all have different benefits in the body. So if you can just say, did I have some in red? Did I have some in white? Did I have some in purple? Is really one of the best ways to support yourself for long-term health.
I love that idea. And, like you were saying, that advanced prep, if you've got court coming up, on a Thursday, go grocery shopping on Monday. Make sure you have all that healthy stuff on hand. Try to even meal prep beforehand, because you're going to be so tired, after Thursday, that you just want to have all that done and getting all those healthy foods into your body. It totally makes sense with, using food as medicine. And a lot of what you're saying is, making total sense for how we can keep ourselves really nourished and resilient for sort of the long journey ahead.
You're spot on. Well, let me go through the last two for the interest of time, and then you can open up to questions or see what else you have. But the kind of last couple thoughts that I have here is, when you're going through so much heartache and so much overwhelm and so many challenges, just thinking, if I can take care of myself, little small habits that feel supportive and not restrictive. I don't ever want to think of someone with a nutrition standpoint on like, hey, you need to lose weight. Don't ever have the ding dong and the wine, and you need to live off tilapia and asparagus. I want you to feel good. I want you to be a powerful mom. I want you to show up in your career the way that you have to. I want you to be energized, and I want you to think clearly, especially if you're going to court or you're battling something, that you're showing up as the best version of yourself. So looking at food as a way of, this is going to help me show up better, and that nourishment is less on perfection and just really more about self-care. And there's a phrase here that I use for myself. I use it for many of my clients, and it's that letting good enough be enough. This whole health industry is so black and white sometimes on like the extreme, or screw it, I shouldn't do anything. And this is not the season to worry about perfection and idealization. Good enough is enough. And sometimes you just got to remind yourself as you're going through that and as you're moving forward. And I'll close with this, and then, Kat, please answer any questions. But the simple choices is really where those long-term benefits come from. When people look at success, no matter what that is in, if it's fitness, if it's money, if it's winning a court case, if it's nutrition, that it is the sum of the decisions you're making day in and day out. And they don't have to be hard, but what is something that you can actually commit to that's sustainable? And we talked about a lot of things today. Don't listen to this and be like, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten the rainbow. I don't have electrolytes. I don't have magnesium. I haven't had protein. Amino acids wet in the bath with my wine and the mocktail. Like, it's so easy to just spiral and like really overwhelm ourselves. But just to say, okay, Kat said a lot of great things. Lauren said a couple great things. What is one or two things that I'm able to do right now? And maybe that's just to say Taco Tuesdays. I heard Taco Tuesdays and we're sticking with Taco Tuesdays, from here on out. And just allow encouragement to meet you where you are right now. Many people that know me and know I'm really direct and I have high standards and high accountability. There's different seasons where nutrition shows up. And when you're combating life changes, when you're combating illness, it's a very different conversation than a lot of people look at nutrition. And I just want to empower you to lean into that this is a choice to take care of you, to take care of your kiddos, to be able to show up and advocate for yourself, especially if no one else is. And to just step back and say, what's one or two things I can do? I can go and buy 24 hard-boiled eggs from Costco and eat one every day for the month, and just not think about it, but they're going to be there. I can buy some greens powder to put in a smoothie that's going to have that multivitamin in it. I can go get some adaptogens, and just allowing your body to really respond so that you can continue to show up and navigate this season. So Kat, I'll put up the closing picture here, I know, for contact information, and let you wrap with any questions or comments. But thank you guys all for having me and listening, and just adding on extra support and encouragement, and wrapping you in love and strength as you navigate this season in your life.
Lauren, so lovely. Thank you so much. This was amazing. There is a question. First of all, we have a couple questions. If you're vegetarian, what do you recommend for protein?
The most easy, simple answer is a plant-based protein. So vegetarian does not necessarily mean vegan. So even whey protein, which is the protein from milk, many vegetarians will do, but there are plenty of vegan proteins out there: pea protein, rice protein, soy protein, quinoa protein. Yep. That's the easiest. Things like tempeh and soy, if it's organic, and if it is non-GMO, are great choices for me. Soy protein is the #1 genetically modified food, and it's also the top 5 allergens. That I do not love that when it's in a really processed form, but there's a lot of companies out there that use pea protein. That's a better choice to do a vegan burger or vegan sausage or something of that sort, which is great. And also, not if they're vegan, it's a little bit conversation, but vegetarian, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, even like, those little Baby Bells, little cheeses, those all have great sources of fat and protein in them.
That's great. Thank you. Do you recommend intermittent fasting at all during times of high stress?
No. And I will say that I am someone who intermittent fasts. I have for over a decade, except when I was pregnant and nursing, and I love it. And I believe in it for weight management, and I believe in it for digestive health. When you are in fight or flight, intermittent fasting exacerbates that. You are going to crash, you're going to drive cortisol, and it is like 18 steps back for maybe 1 step forward. There will be a season in life that if intermittent fasting is important to you, you can come back to. But in seasons of high stress, absolutely, I do not encourage it.
Yeah, I did a little experiment with myself recently. I used to intermittent fast a lot, but I tried to do it maybe like a month or 2 ago, and I was like, nope, this is not working the same. So, yep. Can you suggest some healthy fats that are great for kids too?
Dairy, full fat dairy. So fat-free everything is like my nemesis, because that means it's a chemical shitstorm, because they have taken the fat out and tried to put something in there to make it palatable. Yep. Full fat cottage cheese, full fat yogurt is a great source. Avocado. A lot of kids don't love avocado by itself, but it will go into a smoothie. Absolutely amazing. Butter. I used to have a chiropractor that would always say something was like better brains, or more butter, better brains, or something, because the butyric acid in butter is really good for focus health. Fatty meats, so dark meat, fish, beef, like grass-fed beef, instead of just like chicken and turkey. I know like kids want to live off chicken nuggets, but if they can do like dark meat or steak or things of that sort. And then nuts, nut butter, and coconut's really high too, or olives, olive oil. I mean, a lot of kids don't like that, but Definitely nuts and nut butter, and coconut oil goes in everything and you can't taste it.
Yeah. That's amazing. We're big fans of butter on our broccoli here. You know, we make sure we get our broccoli in by putting a little bit of butter on it. So I love to hear that.
Yep.
That was all the questions for today, Lauren. I feel like I am empowered to just put those little small, changes in place. I'm going to go buy some hard-boiled eggs. I love the idea of making sure there's those healthy snacks on hand, getting that protein in. I think it's definitely one of the first things to go when you're in a time of really high stress is putting good in to get good out. And
Yep.
I think you made so many really excellent recommendations for how to do this without it being overwhelming, right? Without the Pinterest, mood boards about food planning and meal planning and all of that. And, I think a lot of this community struggles with perfectionism. It's part of coercive control, right? Expecting people to be perfect. And so as we're healing from that expectation for perfection, I just want this community to really hear what Lauren is saying. It's about intention, not perfection, right? And so if you can make those small changes, I think it's going to help this community so much to feel better and just be better. So Lauren, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to everyone who's watching. I just wanted to give a heads up that the next Lunch and Learn event is on March 11th with post-separation abuse expert Al Huntoon, and he is going to share his wisdom and expertise with us, including how to get the justice system to see the pattern of litigation abuse that you might be experiencing. So keep an eye out for more information from me about Al, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you again, Lauren. Take care.